I thought they were my friends, but they had other plans for me at the sleepover. What happened to me is one of the most horrific cases of all time. My name is Jennifer Daughtry, and this is my story. I am 30 years old and lived in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. I am mentally disabled, but I don't let that stop me from making this world a better place. Anyone who knew me would say that I truly brightened up their world. I was always so positive and gave people compliments all of the time. I would sometimes go to the nearby homeless shelter to give people some positivity and give them a friend if they needed one. I met 6 people who I started to get along with, and we began to hang out at the shelter a good amount. One day they invited me to a sleepover at the house of one of the 6 people. I glad accepted and was so excited. I hadn't had a sleepover in ages and could not wait. I texted my mom I loved her, and then I went to the house. When I got there, we all went to the basement, and that's when everything shifted. All 6 started ganging up on me, and they took all of my valuables. Next thing I knew, I was being hit with a metal towel rack, and they were painting my face with nail polish and all kinds of other liquids. I screamed for help, but no one heard my cries. Then they poured spices and seasonings all over my body, and my eyes began to burn from the spices. They made me write a suicide note, and after I wrote it, they wrapped me up in Christmas lights and stabbed me over and over until I passed. My body was found the next day in a trash can at a school. 2 of the killers were sentenced to death, and the others got life in prison. Follow for more stories.
This mistake you made at your wedding.
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. I love my wife. I'm gonna get in trouble for that, aren't I?
Yeah. That was Timothy Blyfnick, and just 3 years later, this would be him. In 2020, Blyfnick was on the game show Family Feud, and when the question asked was, "What do you regret the most about your wedding?" his answer was, "Saying I do." He played it off as a joke, but about 3 years later, on March 13th, 2023, Blyfnick was arrested and charged with murder. Rebecca, or Becky Blyfnick, was married to Timothy from 2009 until January 2021 when he filed for divorce. As divorce proceedings were happening, Becky told multiple people that she was afraid about Timothy's mental state, especially if he did not get his way. Becky even told friends and family that if anything should happen to her, it would be because her husband snapped. She texted her sister, "I am putting this in writing that I'm fearful he will somehow harm me, come after me, or will try to do something to me that takes me away from the kids or the kids away from me." She said, "He already has lied multiple times to paint himself as a victim and me as the perpetrator when it is absolutely the other way around." And on February 23rd, 2023, her fears would come true. Here is a timeline of how that day went down. His father found her murdered, and she had been shot 14 times. An investigation into her murder began, and about 2 weeks later, on March 13th, Timothy Blyfnick was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of home invasion. And then 9 days later, he entered a not guilty plea. Blyfnick maintained that he did not murder his estranged wife, and his trial began on May 23rd, 3 months to the day that his wife was murdered. At the trial, prosecution argued that Blyfnick broke into the home through a second-story window using a crowbar to get in. He then shot her 14 times using a homemade silencer. The prosecution presented over 200 pieces of evidence, including GPS data, surveillance footage, and text messages showing Blyfnick's movements in the day leading up to and the day of the murder. The prosecution also showed that 27 shell casings found in Blyfnick's basement were all fired from the same gun that left shell casings at the crime scene. Prosecution also showed that Blyfnick had searched Google for information on how to commit the crime, including tips for breaking into a home with a crowbar and the local police response time. After an 8-day trial, the jury found Timothy Blyfnick guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of home invasion. Go to part 2. This is part 2 of talking about the murder of Becky Blyfnick by her husband Timothy, who had previously made a very creepy comment on an episode of Family Feud. During a sentencing hearing, Blyfnick's defense attorney asked the judge to consider his behavior prior to the crime, including his college education, his job, his financial stability, and clean criminal record. She said, "The court cannot ignore the things that Tim has done in his life that were positive." The sentencing prosecuting attorney said, "On August 11, 2023, I asked this court to show the same mercy he showed Becky Blyfnick when he left her alone on that cold bathroom floor, paralyzed from the waist down, unable to breathe because a bullet had pierced her lung." Thankfully, Judge Robert K. Adrian sentenced Timothy Blyfnick to 3 life sentences that were all combined into 1 natural life sentence, which means he'll be spending the rest of his life in prison. The judge said, quote, "Mr. Blyfnick, you researched this murder, you planned this murder, you practiced this murder. You broke into her house and you shot her 1, 2, 3, and he counted all the way up to 14 times that Becky was shot." Judge Adrian said, "I don't know how long it took you to do that, but some of those shots were fired while she was lying on the ground, and you did all of that while your children were upstairs at your house, lying snug in their beds." Blyfnick reportedly showed no emotion when his sentence was read. Several victim impact statements were read at the sentencing hearing, including from Bernie Postel, Becky's mom. Speaking about Blyfnick's children, she said, "You replaced their mother's love with emotional scars and trauma." Becky's brother-in-law asked whether Blyfnick took into account what effect his actions would have on the children, saying, "Did you think about 12-year-old Deacon as you broke through his window? Did you think about 10-year-old Grayson as you charged down the hallway, chasing his defenseless mom en route to slaughter his entire world?" Like I said, Blyfnick reportedly showed no emotion. He has 30 days to appeal his sentence. Becky Postel Blyfnick was a nurse, a devout Catholic, and beloved in the small community of Quincy, Illinois. She graduated valedictorian from Quincy Notre Dame High School and attended Quincy University. She originally began her career in pharmaceuticals, but she ended up finishing nursing school just in time to start as a nurse for the coronavirus pandemic. And as a nurse, she received a Daisy Award for her service to her patients. And she had 3 sons who are now without either of their parents. Rest in peace, Becky.
This is what happened to 18-year-old Allison Bonilla and how she was abducted while walking home alone. Allison was born on November 7th, 2001 in Cartago, Costa Rica, and she was an only child raised by her mother, Yendri. Her father was not in her life whatsoever, so it was basically just Allison and Yendri by themselves. They had such a good relationship. They were more than just mother and daughter. They were basically like best friends and sisters. Yendri actually owned a nail salon, so Allison would go over to get her nails done and just spend time with her mom. When Allison was in the 7th grade, she decided to drop out of school and pursue a career in modeling. However, that didn't really go as planned, so in 2020, she decided to enroll back in school to finish the 8th grade, and she enrolled in a school that only did night classes. Once class ended, she would take the bus would drop her off at the main street, and then from there, Allison would have to walk home by herself. The path that Allison had to take home was very secluded, and again, she had night classes, so she would be walking this path by herself late at night. Wednesday, March 4th, 2020, that day was pretty much just like any other day for Allison. At around 5:15 p.m. that night, she went to go visit her friend Paola's house, who also was enrolled in the same night school as her. They hung out for a bit, and then the two of them walked to school, and they got there at around 6 p.m. Allison headed over to her classroom, but that's when she realized that all of her night classes were actually canceled for the day. The night was still early. It was around 6:15 p.m. when she realized that her class was canceled, so she decided to go visit an aunt that lived nearby. However, this aunt wasn't home. That's when Allison decided to go visit her boyfriend Harold, who also lived near the school, and just hang out with him for a bit. She was with her boyfriend for a few hours, and at around 8:15 p.m., Allison made her way back home. She went to go wait for the bus, and the bus picked her up at around 8:30 p.m. Then dropped her off at around 8:43 p.m. on the main road, and then, like I said, from there she had to walk home alone. She starts walking home, and that's when she sends a voice note to her boyfriend Harold and a message to her mom, letting them know that she was being followed. She told them that when she got off the bus, these 2 men also got off the bus, and that they were following her and that they looked really scary. Her boyfriend told her to get a taxi and that he would pay for it in the morning, but Allison said no, that she was just going to run. Allison was seen on surveillance footage running home, and in the meantime, Yendri was freaking out. I mean, her daughter is 18 years old, she's being followed by these scary men. She decides to leave the house and just go meet Allison at the halfway point. Comes over to this bridge that Allison normally would have to pass through, but when she gets there, Allison is nowhere to be found. Thought that maybe Allison had just walked back to the bus stop, which was on the main street. You know, maybe she felt safer there because more people were around, so she walked to the bus stop, but Allison wasn't there. She thought to herself, okay, maybe Allison just made it home already and I just somehow missed her. So she went back to the house, but unfortunately, Allison was not there. That's when Yendri called the police, and a search party for Allison immediately began. The day after, on March 5th, police found her eyeglasses on the ground, and along with them, there was also a trail of blood that was about 140 meters long that led investigators straight to a coffee plantation that was on the route that Allison would take. Investigators went to go test the blood, and it was a match for the Bonilla family. Okay, more in part 2. This is part 2 on what happened to 18-year-old Allison Bonilla and how she was abducted while walking home alone. They find Allison's eyeglasses, they find the trail of blood, they eventually find her ID, but there was still no sign of Allison or of what could have happened to her. They start speaking to people in the community, and that's when a couple of witnesses came forward and said that the night that Allison disappeared, one person saw a wine-colored BMW approach Allison, and then another person saw that same BMW driving around the area. Police start looking for the owner of this wine-colored BMW, and that's when they find 28-year-old Nelson Enrique Sanchez Ureña, Allison Bonilla's neighbor. Now, Allison and Nelson didn't really know each other. Yendri says that they only had one interaction with each other in person. One time, Allison went to go pick up her cousins at the bus stop, and Nelson was driving by and he offered the girls a ride home. The only reason Allison agreed to get in the car was because it was daytime, she was with her cousins, and she just knew Nelson as her neighbor. She agreed to the ride, and that was it. That was the only time that Nelson and Allison had done something in person. However, it was discovered that a few days before Allison disappeared, Nelson had actually messaged her on Facebook. He messaged her saying, "Can I ask you a question?" Now, Allison was with her cousin at the time when she got this message, and she told her cousin that she was so confused why her neighbor was messaging her on Facebook. She decided to reply, and she said, "Yes, what's your question?" And Nelson said, "Why don't you like me?" Allison replied and said, "What are you talking about? We're not friends. I don't really know you, so I don't dislike you. Like, where are you getting this from?" And Nelson replied and said, "It's because I don't think bad of you, but I just wanted to ask you if you thought bad of me." Allison reassured him that no, she did not dislike him, and the conversation ended with Nelson saying, "Okay, good vibes," and then putting a peace sign. Just a very weird interaction. Like, why would he ask Allison that when they literally have only met each other in person once? Investigators went, they took his car, and they took his phone, and when they looked through his phone, they found that he had a lot of corn on his phone and that he had a lot of images of people violently essaying women. Inside Nelson's car, police did find blood, and when they went to go test the blood, it came back as matching 18-year-old Allison Bonilla. He was arrested on September 2nd, 2020, and he actually confessed to what he had done to Allison. Allison said that he had a sexual obsession with Allison, and that day on March 4th, when he saw Allison walking alone, he decided that that would be the day he would finally act on his urges. He says he took advantage of the fact that she was alone and that she trusted him, so he offered her a ride home. She agreed. She got in the car, but instead of taking her home, he took her to a nearby coffee plantation and he forced her to get out of the car. He then hit her so hard that her glasses fell off, and then he took her to a nearby house where then he R-worded her, and because he was scared that she would report this to the police, he decided to end her life. He put her body in his car, he drove over to a landfill, and then he threw Allison's body down this 450-meter deep landfill. It's really scary. I mean, Allison was alone on this trail at night. She thought she was being followed by these two men. She was scared, and then all of a sudden her neighbor, who she's had a ride from before and, somewhat trusts, shows up and offers her a ride home. Of course she's gonna say yes. And her options were to either continue to walk alone with these two men or get inside her neighbor's car. It's really, really disappointing, and after confessing to this, Nelson actually took back his confession and said that he only said that because he felt pressured to. However, there was just so much evidence against him that on August 18th, 2021, Nelson was sentenced to 18 years in prison. 18 years for all of those horrible things that he did to Allison. It was just really disappointing for the family, and the judge actually didn't include that he essayed Allison because he said that there was really no proof of that because of how her body was found, which I will get into. So yeah, he was given 18 years, but the family did appeal this, and they were actually granted this appeal, so he will be resentenced, and I will keep you guys posted on what happens with that. As for Allison, it took some time to find her body in this landfill. It took them 25 days after Nelson confessed and pointed them to this landfill to find Allison. And unfortunately, not all of Allison was found. Investigators found some of her bones, some parts of the clothing that she was wearing that day, and one of her shoes that had her nails inside. And when the mom saw the nails, she knew that this was her daughter because, again, she owned a nail salon and she actually had painted her daughter's toes. So she knew that this was part of her daughter's body. However, her skull was never found, and unfortunately investigators think that animals got to her. Because not all of her body was found, they were not able to determine a cause of death, and that's why the judge was not able to include the essaying into the sentencing. Allison Bonilla did not deserve this. She did not deserve this, and it's really disappointing that they had only given Nelson 18 years originally. There's so many protests that happened because of this, and thankfully he is going to get a new sentence, but my heart just breaks for the family, and I'm just so sorry that this happened. I truly hope that Allison Bonilla does get justice.
The guy that gave him permission to use the car,
his mama reported him missing, I'd pop the trunk, saw there's a dead body in the trunk.
Louisiana cops, after a routine traffic stop, finding the owner of the vehicle's dead body in the trunk. His story was that his brother lended him this car. He was on his way home. Cops keep interviewing him during the traffic stop. They start finding little holes in his story. They're interviewing him. Somebody pulls up behind the cop, tells him, hey, the owner of that car's mama just told me he's missing.
Hey now, who are you?
I mean, don't scare me to death.
Well, how are y'all here?
Cause my people from that's them on the phone.
What do you mean they were looking for him?
They looking for him. The car missing. Hey.
Okay, give me your info. Okay, what? His name is Michael. He's not giving that name though. He's given another name.
So he calls his sergeant. He's like, look, some crazy stuff's going on. He's lying. I asked him his address. He don't know where he lives. Close to letting him go because he was only speeding. So they were just going to give him a ticket and let him go. Ask him for consent to search his car. He ended up telling him, yeah, no, go ahead. It's just a little doobie in the seat. The cop was like, I'm not worried about that. The cop is like, you know what? I'm going to do what I've been wanting to do this whole time. I'm going to open the trunk. He opens the trunk. He finds the dead body of the owner. Got mad over something, shot him, took the other guy's gun, shot him with his own gun multiple times, threw his body in the trunk, and was on a joyride for multiple hours trying to find a location to dump this dude's body. He ended up only getting charged with second-degree murder, and he got sentenced, I think it was 20 years in jail, and that's it.
Really?
For one of the most heinous and definitely one of the most outlandish, crazy body cam footage videos I personally have ever seen.
That's insane that, like, he was just driving around like that, out and about.
And then speeding?
Yeah.
Like,
and
are
with
you...
bullet holes in your window already? Like, bro, you're done. Like...
Yeah, it's crazy.
I haven't come across a case like this in 20 years of prosecuting.
She said she'd been being abused and trafficked across the north of England for sex.
Everyone really believed her.
Death threats were made against local restaurant owners.
The town was a step away from anarchy, really.
The keyboard warriors are out, the level of racism.
I was trialled on social media.
There was just about 6, 8 police officers at the bottom of my bed.
It has been very difficult, very, very difficult.
Barrow is a peninsula in South Cumbria, a long way away from most other places. It is isolated, but because of that, it's a really strong and tight community.
It did used to have a good name for itself with the shipbuilding, and then everything's disappearing in Barrow. There's the bad areas and there's good areas.
It's a beautiful town. I've made amazing mates here. I've made an amazing life here.
You will walk down the street and you will see someone you know.
Everyone knew each other, or if you didn't know each other, you'd have heard of them.
So when a story like this breaks, everybody's not just got an opinion on it, everybody knows someone involved in it as well.
In the spring of 2020, a 19-year-old Barrow girl called Ellie Williams published a harrowing Facebook post that would send shockwaves through her community.
They've put lit petrol rags and threatening letters through my letterbox, tried to drown me, strangled me. They've abused me in every way possible. This has been years of me being trafficked to places across Manchester, Yorkshire, Lancashire and Cumbria. These are mostly Pakistani men, and some are business owners.
I remember first seeing, everything on social media, the posts that she put on and all the bruising, etc. And of course it's just heartbreaking, and when you see that, you wanted to get some kind of justice.
A woman from Barrow claimed on Facebook that she was the victim of grooming gangs. She said she'd been being abused and trafficked across the north of England for sex for years.
We had some really serious allegations of grooming, human trafficking, which were getting taken extremely seriously by the force.
It was like a bomb dropping. It really upset people. It really upset me when I first saw it, because of course you think, how on earth has this gone on and people haven't known about it? It felt like one of ours.
Oh,
Hey, Kyle, do you have time to talk?
My mom says I shouldn't speak with anyone but the police. I'm sorry.
No, wait, please. I just want to talk. I have no one else, please.
My mom's back in 20 minutes.
I'll be gone by then. I parked around the block.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here's your coffee.
Thank you, Kyle. Kyle, we've always had a good rapport, right? I mean, you've been over to my house and we get along, okay?
I guess.
Kyle, if you can tell me anything at all about Jonathan or where Jonathan is or anything he's been going through lately, I'm crazy worried. Anything he's been struggling with or he's talked about, like when you guys are playing the Minecraft and stuff?
We don't really talk about that stuff, Mrs. G. We just game and, like, eat snacks.
What about girls? Like, maybe he's been dating or something?
Nah, he's not really into that.
Nothing? Nothing out of the ordinary?
No. Well, nah.
Well, what?
Well, last week he got picked up from school like 30 minutes early by a black pickup truck. I remember because the license plate was from Florida.
Oh, God. Not Florida.
Yeah, it's like all I know.
Did you get the license?
No, sorry. It kind of sped off really fast, but he seemed to know the person. They hugged.
Kyle, I'm home.
Oh, crap, that's my mom. Can you go out the kitchen door?
Okay. Thank you, Kyle. If there's anything else, please just call me.
Blue truck.
Hey, you alright?
What?
You look like you were staring off into space.
Oh.
What were you thinking about?
Yeah, no, it was nothing.
Oh, alright.
But actually, I was thinking, if someone broke through this door, what would my first plan of attack be? Maybe a high kick straight to the jugular? Or a Hulk smash with one of these chairs? Or just a simple throw of the remote straight to the eye? Or just use you as my shield while I run to safety?
What the fuck?
It'd be a tough choice. But yeah, that's what I was thinking about.